Welcome back to Off Ball Takes. I'm your host, Christopher Wells, and this is my co host.
Top notch.
We appreciate all the support, and before we get started with today's live stream, don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us at the OBT Podcast for more content and updates. So, we're back at it again. We didn't get to do a live stream after the previous group of Cup games, but what a weekend of NBA hoops. We got a really fantastic pair of Cup games, semifinal games leading up to what should be a great championship game for the Cup tomorrow, if you're watching this on Monday. But we got to talk about the previous game. So we did have the Knicks and the Magic, but we'll set that aside momentarily and we'll talk about the nightcap one, right? Which I thought was the best game of the night, and that was the Spurs pulling off an upset over the Oklahoma City Thunder, 111-109. And this was a fantastic game where Wemby, obviously before that it was announced that he was coming back, right? That he was getting ready to return from his absence. He had missed the last 12 games before returning against the Thunder. They were 9-3 in the games that he was out. And he came off the bench, and it was funny because the Spurs initially in the game, they did not look very good at all, right? It looked like a classic Oklahoma City. Okay, they're doing it with defense. They're running you off the floor. They're turning defense into offense. Shea's operating in the half court. Threes are falling, right? And so they go into the end of the first quarter. Then they go into the second quarter with a double-digit lead, right? Then Wemby checks in. I believe he checks in at the start of the second quarter. And then all of a sudden, he comes into the game. They go on this big run to get it back. And basically, going into halftime, you're pretty much even, right? It's 49-46 Oklahoma City Thunder. Then in the third quarter, everything goes the Spurs' way. Because the funny thing is, in the first half, right, the Spurs were shooting below 30% from the field. They were turning the ball over. OKC was taking advantage of all of that. But they were never down. They were down by as much as 17. But the fact that they were never down by like 25, and you're like, okay, they're actually closing the gap. They're actually making this a real game, getting it close. And then in the second half, they were able to pull away. I thought De'Aaron Fox was fantastic. Obviously, Wemby, despite playing limited minutes, might have been the best player on the floor, if not pretty darn close. Uh, and it's just funny when you look at the Spurs, it's kind of been the culmination of everything this year where, once again, I continue to have to say, was definitely wrong about this team because I picked the under. I thought the fit would be a little more clunky. I wasn't sure how this would all look together. I liked Fox, so I had no issues with the Fox, Wemby pairing. But just watching all these guys together, where like Stephon Castle, all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but he's taken a leap where he could be the most improved player in the league, and he was Rookie of the Year last year, right? Still kind of turnover prone, but just the fact that he's so much more comfortable with the ball. He turns the ball over a lot, but he has improved as a passer. Of course, a terrific defender. Devin Vassell, he was the guy guarding Wemby. They made it tough, right? Because in the second half, OKC, a lot of their offense was really bogged down, and they couldn't do what they wanted to do, right? Like SGA, even, in terms of his shot selection, right? It was a lot of tough contested step back threes where you can't get to the paint as easily with Wemby out there. And you look at their 3-point shooting, 24% from three, 9 for 37 overall. SGA, 29 points, so they kept them under 30, right? And then most of the other guys had so-so offensive performances, right? Like Chet had 17, mostly from the free throw line, which is fine, right? But then Jalen Williams was 5 for 16. Lou Dort was 1 for 7. Caruso, I thought, had a great game off the bench, was looking like he was going to be the hero of the fourth quarter. And again, this is one where we picked Oklahoma City to win the game. They didn't, and the Spurs have kind of shown why, you got to take them seriously, right? Like, it's still a team where I think you do have to see what it looks like come playoff time, just because we know these young teams where it's the first time they're in the playoffs, they don't always have a lot of success. But you do have Fox who can get wherever he wants from the perimeter offensively. You have Wemby. You have all these other guys. They've shot the three ball relatively well this season, or at least as of late. So they have a lot of pieces that I really like, and they're deep, right? Like, I remember Wemby's rookie year, it's Jeremy Sohan running point guard. And it's like now you have a legit, even though he's not a pass first guy, you have a legit upper tier point guard in De'Aaron Fox with Stephon Castle and Dylan Harper off the bench and all these other guys. So it's a fun team. And just the fact that, like, with Wemby, he's so competitive. Right? There were a lot of moments in the game where you see him clapping and you see him super excited just to be back playing because he had missed the last 12 games, right? I mean, with the calf injury. So it was great to see him as well. And it's just kind of a reminder, right? Where it's like, you know, I would say OKC would still be the favorite, if not prohibitive favorite, to win it all. But the Spurs have looked really good, and credit to them for their cup success, right? Because I mean, the last two games, I don't really believe that they were favored. They beat the Lakers pretty handedly without Wemby, and then obviously the Thunder game, they took this one. And they beat OKC with defense, right? Like they were able to force OKC to turn the ball over, which they don't do a lot. They kept them away from the spots on the floor that SJ likes to operate the most. And then offensively, they were able to keep them honest, right? Where Wemby was able to get the ball in spots where it's kind of hard to really slow him down, where you can throw the ball up. He's got so much length. He can finish around a lot of different guys. He still looked a little rusty with the ball at times, but he came up huge in the fourth quarter, looked like a superstar. So this was a really fun, awesome game, I think, and it's kind of a reminder of what the Spurs could be. You know, maybe not quite as much this season, but they still could be, but then certainly down the road this is going to be a dangerous team, and this could be one of the big, NBA rivalries for a while, right? Like you got the Wemby and Chet factor, and just the fact that they compete and play so hard. So thought it was kind of emblematic of why some people are so high on the cup, even if this could have been just a normal regular season game. It felt like a playoff game.
Yeah, man, this was a fun game for sure. We was completely wrong on it, but this OKC had to lose one game realistically, right? They had to.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been seeing a lot of people on TikTok saying, "Yo, the Spurs found the recipe to slow down OKC," and I'm gonna give them credit, right? They made these players take not the greatest shots, right? Tough shots. But at the end of the day, not every team's like the Spurs, who are very athletic, who are very young, who are willing to run all over the court, right? And then they also have Wemby. Not every team has Wemby. Not only one team has Wemby, and he's 7'5".
Mm-hmm.
So like those things right there matter. And also, OKC would never shoot that bad again. And like I said, I'm not discrediting what the Spurs did because they forced those bad shots. But OKC, right? Like, when do you typically see them shoot that bad? You haven't really seen that pretty much all year.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious to see their next game. I think they're gonna bounce back and destroy whoever they play next. But Castle that game had 30 points, man. You could tell that he's coming into his own, and you love to see that type of stuff because each game he's getting better. But not only that, the Spurs beat two top teams in the Western Conference pretty much that same week or so, right? They
Right.
beat the Lakers off a tough win, and then they played OKC and beat them too. So this team is legit. Shout out to this new look Spurs team with all the young players and obviously head coach. I forgot his name. What's his name?
Mitch Johnson.
Yeah, Mitch Johnson. Definitely love to see them. And honestly, I would love to see a 7-game series out of this. I personally think OKC would win the series, but I think Spurs would make it so much competitive
Mm-hmm.
outside of these other teams. Like if OKC is going against the Minnesota Timberwolves, we know who's going to win that series, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like any other team in the West, we know who's going to win. And OKC probably still wins, but it can maybe be a 6, maybe a 7.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, OKC had a chance to lose that finals, and they could have lost the final maybe if Tyrese was there. OKC struggles against young teams that play fast pace and just and they all play together. Like the Pacers, they had the Nemharts, they had the Neesmiths, they had the Obi Toppins, the Pascals. They had 10 people that could go off their bench and score. That's the same thing as the San Antonio Spurs. They're
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah. I mean,
You know what I mean?
yeah, and that's kind of a good point. Like when you mentioned like the personnel, where it's like, and we're not speaking about this like we're like Einstein, but just in general, like if you're gonna beat OKC, like you need some guys with size offensively who can kind of score and take advantage of maybe some of OKC's smaller defenders, right? Like they were putting Caruso and Lou Dort at different points on Wemby, and he's the tallest player in the league. But even after that, right? Like Castle's a big guard, right? Like Vassell can shoot over some guys. He's got a really high release point. But you also need multiple ball handlers too, because if you don't have enough ball handlers, that's how you're going to get a lot more turnovers, especially if you can have guys who can play against, a ball pressure defense like Oklahoma City, right? Like say when you watch, like a team like the Lakers, right? Like their ball handlers play a little bit slower, right? So when you press them up, it's different than, pressing up like a De'Aaron Fox, who's one of the fastest players in the league, or Stephon Castle, right? Where he's not quite as fast as Fox, but he's a great athlete. With or without the ball. So that's where it becomes really fun. And like you mentioned, shout out to Mitch Johnson, right? Because you know, he was the next guy after Pop, and you didn't really know what to make of him, right? Kind of like Missoula, right? Where I don't think the average person would necessarily know like what to make of him because he would be they're one of the assistants, but he's done a really good job in turning this team around. Obviously, they've added some more talent as well. And again, shout out to Fox. He mentioned after the game that this was the most this has been the most efficient season of his career, and he's kind of back to being one of the better guards in the league, right? Because when they went to the playoffs in Sacramento, he was All NBA third team, right? And now he's kind of back in that top 20-ish, All NBA tier, right? That we've seen him play at, and so now you have a legitimate guy. Like remember last year before Fox, who was the starting point guard? Chris Paul with Stephon Castle, right? Like you couldn't necessarily go into the playoffs with that. But now you have, this is like say for a young team like Houston last year, they didn't really have that type of player, to kind of get them through a tough series like against like a Golden State. So if you're high on the Spurs potentially winning a playoff series, you could make a case that look at the star power that they have. It would still probably be tough because you would have to see what it would translate to in the postseason, in terms of like some of these guys have never been in the playoffs before. But they could be one of those teams where if they get a matchup against, I don't know, let's say they play like a Minnesota in the first round. Like nobody's saying that it's a sweep, but it's a series where there's a chance for them to win, right? Because you could make the case that like, yeah, they got probably two of the three best players on the court. They have depth in defense, so they could slow down some of Minnesota's offensive firepower. But but the thing is, I think title is probably a bridge too far. But you have to do this in steps, right? And the Spurs are already way ahead of I think where you probably would have expected them to be, right? Because their over under was what about 44, 45 or so. And there were some people who were high on them, like I said, Yarby and I took the under. It was 43.5. So basically, Vegas kind of had them as a slightly above 500 team, but they look like they're gonna crush that by the time the season's over. This could be like a 50-win team by the time it's all said and done, right? They're 18-7. They're I think currently, according to the NBA.com, fifth in the Western Conference, but it's like a game apart from all these teams. So a couple wins, they could move up to like 3-4. So, I mean, for them, get into the playoffs, see what you can do. You don't necessarily have to make a huge trade, but I do wonder what is their approach at the deadline. Are they a team that kind of, obviously there's talks about they're probably not going to go after Giannis, not that they have to, but maybe they go after somebody else like a Trey Murphy or a Herb Jones. They have the picks. They have some guys on the roster that they could probably swap out or exchange. So, like I said, I love watching the Spurs. It's a fun team.
Yeah, whoever said I remember seeing the takes. Oh, they got to trade Fox because they got Dylan Harper and
Right.
Castle. Right. That's not that
It's
wasn't smart
quiet
at
now.
all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because like Harper dealt with injuries, and nothing against Harper. Harper is a good player, but there's levels to this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and you need that veteran experience, especially when you go into the postseason. De'Aaron Fox is De'Aaron Fox and Harrison Barnes are the players that have the most experience coming out the on that team.
Right.
Obviously, for the postseason, you're gonna need them. And so that's why you have him, and let Harper continue to develop.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to rush him to be that guy right away because the team is already good enough,
Right.
and just keep playing how you're playing right now. You know what I mean? So
Mm-hmm.
I like what the Spurs got going on for themselves. I think the leagues are in good shape, especially with the Oklahoma City Thunder, the San Antonio Spurs, the Detroit Pistons, a lot of young teams that didn't really make much trades. They just kind of developed their players and, didn't rush the process. And that's why I don't think the Spurs plan to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, make a move like Giannis. I don't see that happening. I've been hearing about the Trey Murphy moves, and maybe they find a way to get Jeremy Shohan off their team and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. But overall, I think they're completely fine how they are. If you can win games without Wemby and have a winning record, that's typically hard.
Mm-hmm.
Like, like
9-3.
you look at teams, yeah, that's really good. Like you look at teams like the Bucks. They just got beat by the freaking Wizards by 42 points
Yeah.
without their best player.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's hard to win in this league. So the fact that they did it without their best player just shows you that how much depth they got and how much coaches trust. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Luke Cornett. That was one of the signings where Yarby and I remember we talked about it in the summer. It's like, yeah, that's an underrated signing because, after Wemby last year, you didn't really have any great options in terms of backup bigs, right? I think before they made the Fox trade, it was like Zach Collins, right? Who's okay, right? But, Luke Cornett's a different type of big, certainly better on the defensive end, right? That was the guy who kind of, as a center, kind of held it down, right? Like you got Olynyk, right? Who's a stretch five out there. So, a lot of good options for them. But yeah, I don't feel like that they're going to be a huge buyer. It just really kind of depends on what do they see. Sohan, I think, is in year 3, right? And now it feels like he's kind of in that DNP range because when he first came back, well, I don't think he's been a DNP because I think he was playing a little bit, and his minutes were up and down. Like he played 4 minutes against New Orleans, right? So he didn't really play a whole lot. But before that, he was like 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 18 minutes, 12 minutes, all over the place. But it seems like Barnes has entrenched himself in that starting group as the other forward. And he's been a corner three-point shooter. He didn't really have a good game against OKC. But, on the season, he's been really valuable for them, right? 13 and a half points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 44% from 3, right, on 6 attempts a game. And that's kind of why some people are like, yeah, plug Trey Murphy into that role. But yeah, you're right. Like they shouldn't feel like they have to rush it because they're not under pressure to win the championship this year, right? It's more so just see what you got, go into the playoffs, whatever happens, happens. So
Exactly.
yeah, so now we might as well mention the other cup game that happened, right? Not quite as great, but it was kind of back and forth. But that was the New York Knicks. They will challenge the San Antonio Spurs, right? And they ended up winning 132 to 120. Brunson led the way with 40 points. He's been incredible in these cup games. 2 of 5 from 3. Their starting 5 was fantastic, right? I mean, pretty much all 5 of their starters got in double figures, right? 16 from Bridges, 29 from Towns on 9 of 11 shooting. Also, a block and a steal. OG Anunoby with 24. He's been great this season when he's been healthy. Hart now entrenched back into the starting 5, right? He had his usual 12 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists. He fouled out in 30 minutes. And then Mitchell Robinson, obviously, coming off the bench, doing work on the boards, right? He had 4 offensive rebounds, 9 rebounds in total. In just 17 minutes, right? And they've kind of figured out which guys that they kind of really want to play, right? It does seem like Yabusele hasn't really worked out, but most of the other guys, right, like Clarkson, Robinson, even Kolek at times has given them decent minutes off the bench. But just watching their offense, it just looks a lot different than it did last year where, they kind of mentioned it on the broadcast, right? Like, yeah, maybe the touches from Brunson, I think it was like that there's more touches, but the ball is moving more. There's a lot more of a faster pace, just more of a pass the ball around, everybody eats type of offense. And that's what you kind of need from a team like this because they have a bunch of guys offensively that can produce pretty much any night. And that's kind of how they're going to win a lot of these games. And, defensively, it can be kind of tricky in spurts, but so far I've been pretty happy and pleased with what I've seen from the Knicks as of late, right? Because it was kind of rough early on in the season, but they're 9-1 in their last 10 games. They've won 5 in a row. They're currently 18-7, so they're second in the Eastern Conference, right behind the Pistons. So can't really be too mad or upset with the results, right? Like I mean, before that, they beat the Magic. Before that, they beat the Raptors, Jazz, Hornets, right? So they haven't had like the craziest difficult schedule, but it doesn't matter. You do have to pile up wins, and like this is a good team, and this feels like the best team in the Eastern Conference right now. But at the same time, it's not like OKC where it's like a juggernaut where it's like you're probably not beating this team without some luck going your way. But I've been really happy watching the Knicks so far, and the way Mike Brown has kind of helped them out. Like I said, it's not been perfect every night, and even in this game, right, there were stretches where the Magic came back in, and we do have to mention Jalen Suggs got hurt in this game. He had 25 points in the first half, didn't really do much in the second half because he got hurt and tried to give it a go, but he couldn't really finish it off. And then now it sounds like he's got a hip contusion, so he might be out for a while. There's no timetable. And Franz Wagner was already hurt, so obviously from a Magic perspective, that's brutal, right? Because they just cannot get games with their whole group of guys for any extended period of time, right? Because it's like right as Paolo comes back, Franz gets hurt. Now Suggs is hurt, so now it's going to be Paolo, right, who's getting his legs back under him. And then, Desmond Bane, who's been a really good addition, but that's going to hurt them, I think, in the short run, where they're 6-4 in their last 10. They had been kind of on a roll. They had figured stuff out, but now it's probably going to be back to the drawing board where you're going to have to hope and pray that you can get some really good production from some good players because they got, they have some tougher matchups coming up, right? Like over the next stretch of games, over the next week or so, like they have to play Denver twice. They have to play the Warriors. They have to play the Raptors. So, I mean, it's not like every game is difficult, but it becomes tougher when you're down some of your best players, right? And so now that kind of forces Paolo to probably have to pick it up earlier than he would probably like because you're going to be shorthanded. And it just feels like when Suggs isn't out there, like he's kind of the glue for this team where they're plus 5 points better in terms of his plus minus when he's out there. And it felt like once he got hurt, the Magic just completely fell off last year. So if he's out for any extended period of time, it's gonna be tough because after that, your other point guards are like Anthony Black, who's been really good, but then it gets dark because it's Tyus Jones who hasn't really been good. Jace Richardson as a rookie who I do like, so it's just kind of unfortunate, right? Where you lost another one of your best players, in a game where this was still a winnable game for them, right? Where where it's like this was an opportunity for the Magic who had beaten the Knicks the previous couple of times they had played them before the Franz Wagner injury game. And now, they're probably going to fall a little bit further behind, I think.
Yeah, man. We predicted this game, and we said the Knicks was going to win this game, right? Especially with the injuries with Franz. But unfortunately, Suggs got injured, and, that's their core, right? Suggs, Franz, Bane, and Paolo Banchero. And so, when you don't have two of them, it's going to be tough to beat that Knicks team. I think the Knicks are playing their best basketball. And, I think easily they're the best team in the Eastern Conference. No disrespect to Detroit. I just have a little bit more confidence in them. They've been together. Mm-hmm. They've been together for the last 2 seasons, but obviously they're getting better playing with each other. They have the 2 superstars that I'm very confident in the postseason, Jalen Brunson. Well, I'll say Brunson's superstar. I don't really call. You think Cat's a superstar?
No, but I think he's been a very good second option. I mean, for Minnesota, they went to the conference finals. On the Knicks, they went to the conference finals. So I think as a co-star second option, he's fine.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I really like this Knicks team, man. They've been playing very, very well. And, I would have loved to see the Knicks versus OKC. Nothing against the Spurs, but I think that's a finals matchup preview. But I still think this win against the Magic was it was just kind of obvious in my opinion to me, to be honest. You know what I mean? That they have the better roster.
Yeah, Knicks are better.
The better. Yeah, and sometimes that's all it really takes. You know what I mean? Just having the better team and, going out there, having Brunson in town, going off and doing what they're supposed to do. You know what I mean? So it sucks for Orlando Magic, though, because like you said, man, they just don't have their core together. And, yes, we're early into the season, but you're trying to get as much chemistry and connection as possible heading into the postseason because necessarily Paolo Banchero has probably been the worst out of the 3 players in Bane and Franz. Obviously just can't find his groove. I don't know if him and Franz can play together. I don't, you know what I mean? So not having them all out there, it's gonna affect them long term for sure. And even like you said, short term now, you're going to have to win some games. Now, obviously, the East is so easy that they can afford to lose some games and still be fine. That's how easy the East is, bro. They're not going to fall down because we got teams like the Miami Heat who can't win a basketball game no more. So, I think they'll be all right. But, yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their team stats and, the Knicks, they're second in offensive rating, 11th in defensive rating. That's pretty good. Net rating, they are 4th. Right, net rating of 8.6. So they're checking all the boxes that you want to see. Orlando, 6th in defensive rating, and then 11th in offensive rating. That will probably change while some of these guys are hurt, and then 9th in net rating. So they've been kind of a sneaky, really good team too. So they were kind of viewed as one of the teams that was kind of like a potential sleeper dark horse Eastern Conference team, but that'll probably have to wait until some of these guys get a little bit healthy. Now, I'd be really encouraged if they got some wins while some of these guys are out. I just think it's going to be really tricky. But now I guess we move on, and this is December 15th, so now this is kind of the first stretch where guys who sign contracts in the summer are eligible to potentially be moved, right? And there's the second date, January 15th, right? So the guys that got like the raise or whatever, those guys will have to wait a little bit later, right? So say like a Jonathan Kuminga, he's a January 15th guy. Whereas I don't know, I don't know, a Jake LaRavia. That's a December 15th guy, right? Just kind of throwing a random name out there. So in terms of like potential, I guess Mark Stein kind of hinted at, he thinks that there could potentially be some trades over the next few days. I don't know if it's guaranteed to happen, but he did mention that just in the sense of like there are teams that are probably going to try to make some moves sooner rather than later to try to bring some guys in. Of course, you have the Giannis stuff going on, right? So how much does that potentially factor into things, right? There's been reports from Michael Scotto, I think of Hoops Hype, that the Bucks may be looking to be a buyer as opposed to a seller, which is interesting, right? Depending on, I guess, whatever happens with Giannis. But what are you thinking of in terms of like now that trade season has kind of officially begun?
Oh, Zach LaVine's a buck. Giannis doesn't get traded. I think there is going to be trades earlier. Typically a lot of the trades happen during the deadline, but I do think a lot of trades will happen now. I think if Kuminga was eligible to be traded today, he would have been traded tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's the 15th of January, but yeah, I think Zach LaVine's easily a buck. I think that's the obvious. I think that's the big move that they're going to go after. The problem is, even with Zach LaVine on Milwaukee, the team's still going to be pretty bad. Zach LaVine and Giannis, but honestly, Giannis's market's not big. That's the thing. I don't think people are going to wait on the Giannis trade, because if you think about all the people that have all the trade value, right? San Antonio Spurs, why are they going to blow their team up for Giannis? Makes no sense, right? Oklahoma City Thunder, that's just a pipe dream. That's not going to happen, right? And then you look at the Knicks. Why would the Knicks just change their team mid-season when they're playing perfectly well? So those are three options that you'd be like, okay, those are good. The only realistic option, and maybe I'm being biased, is the Miami Heat, because how bad they have been recently, and they have the players. I won't say they necessarily have the picks, unless they somehow somebody get in the 3-team deal and Milwaukee gets more draft capital out of it. But they got the players, right? So I think it's Miami or Milwaukee, and there's always sleeper teams, but Detroit makes no sense, right? Like we could just look at the standings and be like, well, this doesn't make sense. Why would he go here? You know what I mean? I think it's those two options, and he's probably going to stay with Milwaukee. And then I think during the offseason, that's when he's gone. I don't think this is the year. I don't think this trade deadline, he's gone. I don't think so. So, Herb Jones, you see that video, Herb Jones, when a Lakers fan was like,
yeah, I did.
Yo, Herb, you're a Laker. Yo, he was like,
but what? He thought it was real. Yeah. But, I guess we could kind of stay on some of these teams and names, right? Because in the case of the Bucks, right? Like, to me, I guess it depends on what Giannis wants, right? Like, so say if he actually were to ask out, then you kind of have to start also kind of preparing to, I would say, see if you can get back stuff for some of these other players, right? Could you get something for Portis? Could you get something for Kuzma? I'm not saying they will, right? But could you get a team to bite if, Giannis is like, all right, I want out. And we don't know what's going to happen, right? But Chris Paul is probably one of the first names that might have to be on that list too, because obviously the Clippers have sent him home, and he is on a minimum contract, so it's a pretty gettable deal. But
hey, Chris, listen. When it comes to Chris Paul, right? I've seen teams say, "Yo, I'm interested in Chris Paul." That has to be the worst mistake. He is awful. He's no longer a basketball player. He's not. I'm sorry. So even teams like the Minnesota Timberwolves, you rather just roll with Rob Dillingham, even with his struggles, and Mike Conley. There will be no point of having.
It's not even Dillingham; it's Bones.
Yeah. So there'll be no point of having CP3, right? Then the Rockets, absolutely not. I'm fine with Reed Shepherd. So I'm sorry, retirement tour. NBA is a business. You're not a good basketball player. They're gonna let you go.
Yeah, and that's gonna be interesting to see what happens with that. But
Exactly. So, yeah.
yeah. But let's talk about the Heat, right? Because you mentioned they don't have the picks, right? Because I think they're still kind of figuring out the Rozier thing, right? Because they owe, what is it like? Is it this year or next year's pick to the Hornets, right? In the Rozier
Yeah.
deal, something like that, and then
Listen,
they have to
man.
get it. And if
Yeah.
they get it back, they could do something with that, but we don't know.
The league is a joke for that. I'll be honest with you because they knew about it and they still let this trade get through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, okay, obviously you're not going to get a first round pick back, but like, can we get something with our salary? Because he got a $26 million expiring,
Right.
and it's like, can we trade him? What can we do with Terry? Is he just
Yeah.
going to be on our roster,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't do nothing with him? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's just pathetic. But talking about this Miami Heat team, man, right? Like they're in a 5-game losing streak today. They lost to the Toronto Raptors, which the Raptors haven't been playing their best basketball. They haven't. They've been struggling due to the RJ Barrett injury, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the sad thing about the Miami Heat right now is that to start, so they lost to the Magic, but they had like a 4 to 5 day break. Now, typically, you don't get those long breaks in the NBA. You don't, especially early in the year. They came back and look even worse. So my thing is, Coach Spo has been terrible with the rotations. Tyler Hero mysteriously gets a toe injury, which he played the game against the Magic, was completely fine, and then gets randomly scratched after 5 days. Mind you, the Miami Heat training staff hasn't said nothing about this,
Mm-hmm.
so that's pretty pathetic. And I'm already not the biggest fan of Tyler Hero, so a lot of Miami Heat fans were upset that he didn't play today.
Mm-hmm.
This is the first time the Miami Heat have scored less than 100 points. They scored 96 points, and that just shows you that this team is no longer the team that was putting up 130, 140 points to start the
Mm-hmm.
year. And that's because teams have film now. And when teams have film, obviously they can slow you down. And so obviously there's no answer right now for Spo to change the offense up at all.
Right.
Another thing too is they have one of the worst benches, and they also can't shoot the ball. One of their better shooters was Simone Fontecchio, and he's just running cardio out there. He has not been good at all. Another thing is they're not playing Khalil Weir. Khalil Weir had 19 minutes today with Simone Fontecchio having like 27,
Right.
who makes no sense, where Scotty Barnes is getting offensive rebounds down the stretch and Khalil Weir is benched for the last 7 minutes. So Spo in the rotation, Spo in the defense hasn't been great. The offense, they can't hit shots. Norman and Tyler, I don't think they could play together.
Mm-hmm.
It's a disaster right now. And so, does Pat Riley go out there and make the move to trade for Giannis? The trade package is there, right? Like I said, they may not get the capital,
Mm-hmm.
but you could throw a Tyler, you could throw a Jovic or a Jaime and a Khalil Weir with 2 first-round picks and maybe a 3-team deal, whatever the case may be. But if you're going to rebuild, you're getting an all-star player in Tyler Hero at the end of the day,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're getting a player in Jaime or Jovic, who Jaime has been necessarily great, and you're getting a player who has a lot of potential in Khalil Weir with capital. So I think that's how you start a rebuild. Like I said, maybe I'm being biased and maybe that's not the best deal, but like I said earlier, a lot of these teams that have better deals than the Miami Heat just don't want Giannis. They
Mm-hmm.
don't.
Yeah,
So yeah,
it's really a point. Yeah.
I think the Miami Heat are just in a bad spot right now. 5-game losing streak is unacceptable, and I'm tired of throwing Spo, saying Spo is one of the better coaches in the league, which he is, but he hasn't been. He hasn't been. He just hasn't. And Heat fans know why. He doesn't know how to run a proper rotation.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question where, like, could you turn the Rozier contract and put that in, a deal for somebody? Because that's kind of what you would be looking for. Because, like you said, it's a big expiring contract. So if you could put that, in some type of deal, that would be big time, right? Because then you get that off the books. You bring in somebody who can actually help you. Because you can't have a 20-something million guy just kind of sitting on the bench. Or, it's not even with the team, but you know what I mean? Like, you can't have that on your roster. So they're definitely one of the teams that I would look at in terms of what do they do at the deadline, in terms of are they a buyer for a guy like a Giannis or someone else, are they a seller or somewhere in between? That's where I'm not really sure, right? So that's a team where I'm kind of curious to look out for what they do. But
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, then I guess because you mentioned his name, and in fairness, it's not until January 15th, but I mentioned it as well. Mr. Jonathan Kaminga, right? What do you do there? Because at the beginning of the season, for the first couple weeks or so, he actually looked really good, right? He had made some real strides as a passer playmaker. I think he was leading the team in rebounds per game. He was playing pretty much within the offense. So everything, and they were winning, right? Everything was clicking. But then they start to struggle. I think what happens? Then Steph gets hurt. No, they start to struggle. then he gets benched, and then he gets hurt. And then by the time he comes back, then he's forced to coming off the bench again, and then they're still losing. And unfortunately, the last few games, he's now been a DNP, right? But it hasn't necessarily led to wins either. But it definitely feels like that this is probably it for him as a Warrior. It's just a matter of what are they going to get back for him? Because, if I'm another team, am I really going to give up a bunch of stuff to get a guy who's getting DNP'd on a team that isn't really talented enough to just be like, we'll just send this guy. I mean, they haven't literally sent him home, but I don't think they're talented enough of a team to just be like, yeah, I mean, they're DNPing this guy. And I know why they're doing it, because they're like, oh, he hasn't done what we need him to do. But it feels like the relationship's over, and you're just kind of waiting to see, like I said, what team bites. Because I think it depends on which team. Because there are teams that could probably be like, he's a talented player. We probably don't have to give up a lot. But then if you're Golden State, that's kind of like one of your only real trade chips of value, right? Where it's a guy who's on a decent sized contract where you could actually get something back. They have, I think, 3 tradable firsts. Do they really want to do it? Do they believe that they're like a trade or 2 away from, title contention? I don't know, because, I mean, this was a team that I was kind of high on, and they haven't really looked very good despite Steph playing great. So what do you think happens with Kuminga? Because I would say he gets traded at this point, and I'm sure you believe that too. But, like, do you feel like that there's a deal out there where they could actually get somebody good, or more so just turn him into 2 other guys or, like, 1 other guy that's probably not much better, but maybe it's just better by having that player actually play?
The problem is the Golden State Warriors destroyed Jonathan Kuminga's trade value, and that's their fault because you could have easily done a sign and trade during the offseason. Easily could have done that and got, something out of the Sacramento Kings. The Kings wanted him bad, and they still want him, right? So you could have got something out of that, but they're like, no, we're going to. But you know what I think it is? I think the front office and the coaching staff are on different pages because the front office is like, no, we want Kuminga, but Steve Kerr does not like Kuminga. Respect. He just doesn't.
Right.
There's no reason why he's getting DMPs. The Golden State Warriors are a bad team. Kuminga should be playing. Even with the mistakes, even with him not playing well, that's just more of a, listen, I don't want you out there because I don't like you. Simple as that, right? When you're the coach, when you're the boss, you can do those decisions. And it is what it is. They just paid him all this money. So you think you'll play the player, but they're not. So I think when it comes to a trade, I don't even know if this is possible, and I don't know if it makes any sense. I don't even know if it works. But I don't know. I just thought about like Kuminga for Bobby Portis. Can that happen? Or can we do, a Kuminga to the Kings, some involving, Keon Ellis and some other pieces. They're not going to get an upgrade over Kuminga, respectfully. That's done and over with. So they gotta have to take what they get. Maybe the Miami Heat decide to trade Wiggins back to the Warriors. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the Pelicans make a move.
Yeah.
Right.
Murphy's been a name mentioned, but I don't get that one. Like if I'm New Orleans.
Yeah, it doesn't mean Murphy's a better player. I don't care what anybody says.
Right. Yeah, and it's like, unless I'm getting Kuminga plus like all your firsts, I don't know. Like I wouldn't do that if I'm New Orleans.
You better give me Derek Queen.
but that's the problem, and like that's the issue. Is like there's not an obvious deal in my opinion for Kuminga, right? It's not like that there's a player that's sitting right there where you're like, this is the obvious deal. You just have to wait until January 15th. I don't know if the Pelicans are going to be like, yeah, sure, we'll give you Trey Murphy for Jonathan Kuminga and picks. I mean, the Warriors' future picks could potentially be really valuable because it's kind of like what the 2027 or like 2029 Lakers first before the Luka trade, where you're kind of thinking, okay, once Steph is done, right, the Warriors probably won't be as good, and because they don't really have any other foundational pieces to build off of, so we might keep so we might get some potential top picks. But then if you're the Warriors ownership and front office, do you really feel like giving those picks up? Because you could be like, well, then if we're bad, right, we're not going to have our picks. So I don't know. It really depends, but I do agree that I think that there's probably a level of, and I think from what I understand, it ties especially to ownership, where it seems like Joe Lacob, right, that's the guy, who's the owner or team governor or whatever of Golden State, where he's kind of put his thumb on the scale in the last few years, where he's kind of put in his own people and tried to kind of make more decisions on his own, right? Where it's like they didn't want to necessarily take Kuminga, but he liked Kuminga. So it's like we don't have a choice because we have to listen to, like you said, what the boss tells you to do. Things like that, right? And since they whiffed on those picks during the couple years that they were bad, where it's like Wiseman didn't work out, seems like Kuminga's not working out. It's kind of a tough spot to be in. So I don't know how he sees this. So that's the kind of the part where I'm curious of, is he willing to part with those picks? Because if they do, maybe they could get somebody decent. But I don't necessarily know if he wants to do that, and is it just more likely it's a half measure? And like I said, I don't know Kuminga's trade value. Because like you said, the teams that wanted him in the summer probably still want him. But now he's on a bigger contract, so what's the deal now? How do they feel? Like Phoenix, like they're better than I think people expected. Maybe they stink by the time the deadline happens, but are they comfortable still doing the Kuminga trade? Maybe they are, and like you mentioned, the Kings and some of these other teams, it's something to look out for, because I'm not banking on that they're gonna just get a really good player in return, and even then, it's probably already too late, because you look at the standings, they're the 8th seed right now, and it's kind of a decent climb to get out of the play-in and get in the top 6, especially because they've lost a couple of games that could have been really helpful, right? Like they lost to the Wolves without Anthony Edwards. They lost to Portland, right? In a game where they've had multiple guys out, and that's despite Steph having a couple of great games. He's had a great season. So,
That's because
yeah.
that's because Jimmy Butler is a black hole to every single team, and he has been terrible for this Golden State Warriors team. And I don't care what anybody says.
You think
He's
so?
holding this team. Yeah, he's holding this team back. Because the thing about Jimmy is, I honestly don't think he's all that. Like Jimmy, if you watch Jimmy play, bro, it's just like you have Steph and Jimmy, so why aren't you winning games? Now, obviously, it's more to that because it's a team game and stuff. But like, bro, like they should be winning more than what they could. And the thing is, when Steph goes out, Jimmy can't win the Warriors a game to save his life. Typically, your second guy needs to do it. He's getting paid all this money, right? He complained about, yo, why am I not getting paid this? Well, maybe because you don't play well in the postseason. We don't care about in the regular season. We don't care about postseason Jimmy, which that was the year that you carried the Miami Heat, but then we hasn't seen it since because you've been a crybaby. So when's the last time we've really seen postseason Jimmy outside of that?
Yeah, I mean,
Christopher.
the last couple of games hadn't been great. I think as a whole on the season, he's been solid, but then you look at the supporting cast, and it's just not as good as I think what was expected, right? Because this was a team that was expected to be one of the better teams outside of OKC and Denver. A lot of people viewed them as like the 3rd, maybe 4th best team in the Western Conference going into the season, and they have not been that, right? Horford's not been very good. He's also been hurt. And then, like a lot of the young players, it's just a lot of inconsistencies. Because if you catch them on the right night, they could look pretty good. But then, as of late, they've been just straight up bad. 4-6 in the last 10. And that's where it's another one of these years where, again, you're going to have to potentially do it from the play-in. And what you don't want is, you look at the standings right now, that's a worst-case scenario where OKC's 1, Denver's 2. It could change. But if that happens, you're not getting out of the first round because I don't think they can beat either of those teams. I think they could have a chance against maybe some of these other teams, but as of right now, you're kind of mainly just banking on the infrastructure. It's kind of hard to really watch them play and feel like that it's a real contender right now. So that's where I'm very curious to see what they do at the deadline, because it's something that could help, because they've had a history of playing much better the second halves of these seasons, but if you're going to win the championship, you have to be kind of good right from the get-go, right? Like, there's a reason why, like, they're not really mentioned right now as a championship contender because they haven't looked like it through the first nearly 30 games of the season. Like, could they be better? Because we've seen, like I said, teams get off to slow starts, close the season on a good note, sure, but that's not a championship team. And I think that's probably a disappointment given that, last year, before the trade, it was understandable why they struggled. Now they have Butler, but now they've still struggled, and now they have this Kuminga piece where you got to figure that out. And like I said, I don't know. Ideally, he'd be playing well, and then you just kind of go your separate ways and then say your goodbyes and you bring in somebody really good. But I don't feel like that's going to happen because, like you said, Kings, Suns, whatever other team that was interested, I mean, what players are they realistically going to get? Like, why would I give up some really good players to get Kaminga? That he feels to me right now like a buy low guy. But maybe there are some teams that are like, we like him, we think we can fix him, we'll be willing to give you some pieces. I don't know. So I'm not a GM, obviously, but to me, if I was another team, I wouldn't be giving up a lot to get him.
Yeah, no, not at all. I
Yes.
agree.
Yeah, so and that's the tough part where like we'll see, and you mentioned the Kings as a team where they have pieces where they should probably be active at the deadline, but at the same time, some people don't think they will because they're with the CBA, they're in that tier where they have guys who make a lot of money. That if I'm another team, am I gonna necessarily put 50 million worth of salary to go out and get Levine? Like Levine's a good player, but how many teams have that much salary lying around where they can just be like, we can just bring in Zach Levine and not give up much, right? Like, it's not a lot of contenders that can say that, right? It's mostly teams that would probably be in the tier of not quite good enough, need another player, and then they could put themselves into a dark horse maybe status. But I don't see a team where it's like you add Levine, you're instantly one of the inner circle type of teams. And if you're the Kings, I don't know. I mean, if they don't get a good offer, do they just keep some of these guys? Like him or Sabonis. Like you mentioned, Keon Ellis, he could be a guy, but I mean, he makes his salary so small. That's probably like if you deal him, it's probably for not much, unless he's included with somebody.
Yeah, no, I don't know what the Sacramento Kings do at this point. I really don't. Like they're just in a bad spot right now. But they're probably thinking about the long term future, so they probably look at pieces like Keegan Murray, and if they can pull off a Kaminga,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then you have two nice young pieces
Yeah,
you can build off.
get a top pick.
But yeah, you get a top pick. You know, maybe keeps a bonus, try to flip a Levine, but like you said, his contract's kind of big. They
Mm-hmm.
got to get rid of DeRozan. I'll tell you that they got to get rid of him.
Yeah, and his
But
contract's not too big. I just don't know how many teams are gonna want him. I mean, I guess you could just talk yourself into his smaller ish salary, like 24-ish million. But I don't know. It's, it's a tricky one.
not very good. Yeah, not very good.
Yeah. So I mean, so in terms of like teams that you think could be the most likely to be sellers, I mean, it feels like it would be a lot of the bottom feeder teams, right? Like New Orleans, they don't have their first, but like if somebody gives them a good offer for some of these guys, I could see them trading some of these guys away. The Kings, like that's another seller, but I don't know if people are gonna be willing to give up a lot for those guys. What do you think of Dallas? Because they've played much better the last several games, and we were all kind of thinking, yeah, they should trade Anthony Davis, since they fired Nico or whatever. But now they've kind of stabilized a little bit as of late, and maybe they're gonna talk themselves into, all right, we're the 10th seed, we're 6-4 in our last 10. Kyrie, maybe he'll be back in a month or so, and then let's get the ball rolling and see what we look like.
Yeah, I think they're gonna be buyers. I really do. I think they've been playing well necessarily because Cooper Flag has been improving so well. Obviously,
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Davis is back, right?
Mm-hmm.
Klay Thompson's playing his role coming off the bench. They're just playing a better brand of basketball. They don't got to deal with D'Lo. Brandon Williams is a better player than D'Lo at this point.
Ryan Nemhard too.
Yeah, Ryan Nemhart and stuff like that. So I think they're building something over there, which we all expected to start the year. Like I had expectations for this team.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not. I did. On paper, they look pretty decent. It's unfortunate though they don't have Lively for the rest of the year, so that is a big
Yeah.
loss.
Yes.
Um, but I do like what they got going on over there. Especially if you can get Kyrie Irving back, then stuff starts getting a little juicy because then, um, playing you if you get into the playing and you get into the playoffs, you got some dogs over there in Kyrie and AD.
Yeah, and that's kind of the question where like now you're without Lively, but maybe, and that's not a good thing, but maybe it kind of forces them into having to play one big or the other. Like, I mean, if Gafford's healthy, do they start both bigs at the same time? That's kind of what they were looking at. But then who's your backup center, right? It's like Dwight Powell, who's kind of, I guess, reemerged after kind of being out of an NBA rotation for a long time. So that's a team to kind of watch. And then the other team is Memphis, where they are 7-3 in their last 10. Ja's back, but right as he comes back, Zach Edey, who was kind of their rock, their center of the universe, and he was playing really, really well. Then he gets hurt. He's going to be out, I think, for at least a month. And so now they're kind of back to, well, now we better hope and pray that Ja can kind of get back into the swing of things. Because with Zach Edey out, our big rotation now is completely different because that was helping them win games because just his size, his activity, his rebounding, his ability to play inside, I mean, was a real factor for them. And now they're going to be without that again for quite a while, which is kind of a disappointment because, like I said, they had played their way kind of back into the swing of things. Like they're like a game behind Golden State, where they were awful, for a while, right? Because they had, Ja and all these other guys out, still are without their other guards. Ty Jerome and Scottie Pippen Jr., they haven't played at all. But, what do you think of Memphis, right? Because it seems like they're probably going to be in a tough spot without Edey, but, maybe you get Ja to be good again. I don't know.
I have to think they stand still. I don't think they make a move. I mean, they have the draft capital now for the main trade, but I don't see them making a big move for this year. Actually,
or like moving
I don't
anybody.
I think they kind of just roll with what they got.
Mm-hmm.
And then because draft capital is important, right? Like superstar players always come available, and they can load up a trade now with all their capital and stuff later on in the future. So I think they kind of stand still, see what they got. They're, like I said, they have been playing a little bit better.
Yeah.
Ja's energy necessarily hasn't been playing. He still hasn't been playing the best basketball, but you can tell the relationship is getting better over there.
Yeah, and the KCP thing just kind of stinks where he was, brought in as a starter and now he's kind of been coming off the bench. He's just not shot the ball well again at all. And maybe
for the
that's
last 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's a product of the teams he's playing on. Like Orlando's offense was horrible last year. Memphis has been without almost any guards for most of the year. So maybe that's part of it. I don't know. But
Maybe
I do kind of wonder, could he be like a sneaky trade candidate
Yeah,
guy?
that's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
He could possibly get traded and flipped, and make them play another younger guy, or Cedric continues to get way more minutes,
Right.
and stuff like that. But he could be a sneaky addition. I feel like somehow, some way, he's going to end up on the Lakers.
For what? Well, what is his contract at this point? Is he still? He's got the big contract because that's what Orlando gave him. So I don't. He's not on like a small contract.
Yeah, but somehow Lakers always get somebody.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's so looking at Spot Track. That's the best trade machine out there, in my opinion. He's making 21 million this year, right? So that's probably like their expirings or whatever, right? It could be like, I don't know, Gabe Vincent, Kleba or something. I don't know if Memphis will do that, but the Lakers' issues, they don't have seconds, and then they don't have a lot of firsts to give up. But I don't think anybody's giving up a first for KCP at this point. I don't think so.
You give up a first round pick for KCP, bro. You got to get fired.
Yeah. No, I don't think anybody's doing that at this point. Not at this point. So, yeah, we'll see. Any other teams? I guess to kind of close it off. I guess the other bottom feeder teams, like, well, not bottom feeders, but say like the bottom 5 in the West, right? Because we already mentioned Kings, Pelicans, Clippers. I think they'll probably either stand pat or bring somebody in. I don't think they're sellers. Utah, I don't know. People thought Markkanen would be traded, but they've actually been sneakily a little bit better than some people anticipated. So, but then if they play too well, they might lose their pick. But maybe they like where they're at. I don't know what they do with Markkanen. And then Portland, you just got to get your guards back because I mean they've been bad recently, but they also don't have a point guard, right? They still somehow got to win over the Warriors, but at least I guess Avdia has been really good for them.
Yeah, man. It can either be a slow trade deadline or it can be a big trade deadline.
Yeah, and then I guess last but not least, looking over in terms of trade talk, looking over at the East, Wizards no. But then like Indiana, like do they have anybody that maybe some other teams might want? Because I've heard stuff like Mathurin, maybe.
They're gonna be getting a big. They're gonna get a big.
You think so?
Yeah, they're gonna load up for next season.
So you don't think they sell?
No, I think what they personally should do, they flip Mathurin because they got to pay Mathurin. You got to think
Yeah.
about that. I don't know if they want to pay Mathurin. So
Hmm.
you could flip Mathurin for Zubac.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I don't know if the Clippers are going to do that, but and then it's like, is Indiana going to give up firsts? I don't
I
think they
think,
can.
yeah, you know what's crazy?
Mhm.
Like, Indiana knows next year that they're probably going to be a good team.
Right.
So you have a team of Tyrese, Nemhart, Neesmith, Siakam, and Zubac. You're usually one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference, of course, right?
Mhm.
Um, but like I said, I don't know if they give up a first, but they do need a big, and because that's one of their biggest needs.
Yeah, lost Miles Turner.
Yeah, so I've been seeing that Mathurin for Zubac trade. I seen the Daniel Gafford stuff. I even see some Walker Kessler rumors.
Yeah, and
Uh,
that's interesting because they Turner is a stretch five, and those guys aren't really shooters, so that's kind of a different look for them.
yeah, but like, where are you gonna find a stretch five though? That's my thing.
Right. Yeah, and you can see why they were like not all that keen on paying for Miles Turner, right? I just like if
Which was the right decision.
yeah, for the money he was making, right? Like that's maybe if they had won it all and Halliburton doesn't get hurt, maybe they opt to do it. I don't know because I don't know what Milwaukee does. But yeah, it's been rough. I wonder he might be a guy that the Bucks, if they move Giannis, which I don't know if they will, but if they did, he would be a guy that could probably have some value on another team. Like I could see another team saying like he's a shot blocking stretch five. Let's bring him in and we have the playmaking to kind of get more out of him than maybe Milwaukee can.
Yeah, I'd say this. Miles Turner is never returning back to Indiana. He be throwing shots at Indiana every time he
Right.
gets a chance, dude.
Mm-hmm.
So he feels some type of way about it. But yeah, man, I think Indiana does make a move for a center,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but Boston probably makes a low key move, right? Like a low key move, maybe like flipping a Chris Boucher,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Atlanta's an interesting team,
Yeah, because
right?
Porzingis has the illness now, so he made or he still has it. I think he had it last year. Does he turn into a big expiring $30 million contract or
Yeah.
yeah, like
So
now they've kind of been back down to earth right now. So now hope Trey Young's supposed to come back soon. So maybe he'll kind of stabilize things because they've been not playing as well recently. Even though Jalen Johnson's been great, but they need a little bit more help. I think on that end.
Miami maybe, and then
Mm-hmm.
Orlando can't
Yeah.
can't even afford to make a move.
Right. And then Cleveland, that's just
Oh, yo, that's the one right there.
right.
Cleveland Cavaliers have a major problem because if Donovan Mitchell does not play well, the team won't win. They just can't win games right now.
Mm-hmm.
And they got to figure out what they're doing with Garland or Jared Allen. Those are the two pieces they need to figure out. What are we doing with them?
Yeah.
Um,
And this year,
Darius Garland been awful.
yeah, and this year they haven't been healthy. Like Mobley's now going to be out for at least a couple weeks with a calf strain, and that's a guy that they're super reliant on. And Garland, he's been playing better the last couple of games, but it's been pretty rough for much of this season. And without Mobley, then that's kind of the cornerstone of your defense. They just lost to the Hornets, and like you said, when Mitchell's not fantastic, it's really hard for them to win compared to last year where it was much more balanced and they just don't look like the same team, but they're also a second apron team. So I don't think there's really a whole lot they can necessarily do unless they break it up. My guess is that they probably just play out this season, see what it looks like, and then if it doesn't work, explore stuff in the summer. But it's been pretty disappointing because they, along with the Knicks, they were looked at as the two co-best teams in the Eastern Conference, and it has not played out like that at all. Especially because they've been hurt, but plenty of other teams have had injury excuses too. So that doesn't quite line up for me, even though I know they're not very deep.
Yeah, I agree. They got to figure it out ASAP.
Yeah. So last but not least, I guess before we kind of probably close it out, what is the prediction for Tuesday? So I guess tomorrow between the Spurs and the Knicks, right? Because like you said, who knows? Potential quote unquote finals matchup. Two really good teams that have been playing really good basketball. Wemby's back, so now like both teams are relatively close to being relatively at full strength. I think they pretty much are. So, what are you kind of looking to see in this matchup?
I got the Knicks.
You got the Knicks.
I got the Knicks winning this game.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Wemby's not fully 100. He's playing, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but it takes time to like get back to yourself. And even though I will say Wemby did dominate in that fourth quarter and against OKC down the stretch,
Mm-hmm.
I just really like Brunson a lot and Cat. I really like that duel. And they're I don't think anybody in the league can really slow down Brunson. Like you can force him to take bad shots, but this dude is just a bucket getter, dude. Like
Yeah.
he's him. He's just him.
Yeah, and
And I
it's
mean,
funny. Yeah.
I just like what the Knicks got going on. I also like the Spurs what they got going on, but I think the Spurs
Mm-hmm.
their luck's gonna run out.
Yeah, and it's funny because we had that comment from like one of our last regular shorts or videos or whatever, where they were talking about Brunson and they were like, he's not been that great. He's not really him. And it's like, no, Brunson is really good. I mean, he may not be, as good as some of the other names that were mentioned. I think they brought up like Shea and Luca, but he's he's awesome. Like he's really good, especially
Yeah,
because like you said, it like Orlando has a bunch of guys that personnel wise, you're like they should be able to slow him down. It didn't matter at all. You know what I mean? Like because even in the first half, like with Jalen Suggs, that was like a relatively. I know they didn't have Wagner, but like their guards were there, and it just didn't matter at all. He could get whatever he wanted to.
exactly. And that's why I'm not too worried, even with the Spurs having solid defenders over there as well. Like there's just people that are unstoppable. Jalen Brunson's probably the best point guard or second with Cade in the East,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably lean the Knicks as well. I think like the OKC one, I think this will be a really fun game. It just kind of comes down to like, the supporting cast as well cuz I feel like the Knicks collective supporting cast is probably better or at least more proven, but at the same time, like the Spurs have been playing really good basketball and they're deeper than the Knicks. So, if any of the starters for the Knicks are kind of struggling, you're going to have to hope and pray that somebody off the bench can give them something. Oh, McBride is the guy that I think has been out due to injury, and he's probably going to be out for a little bit. So that does make him a little bit less deep, but I guess that's where you just plug in a Kolek, different type of guard. But you would probably need somebody off the bench to pop off. But Mitchell Robinson, could he make an impact on the boards? Get some offensive rebounds against the Spurs, second unit bigs, right? Towns, Brunson, I think they have to have big games. So, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a really fun matchup.
Yeah, same man. Looking forward to that.
Yeah, so yeah, we've pretty much run into the hour plus of the stream. So I think we're probably going to cut it here, but we appreciate people for showing out. So again, as we usually do, if you want to join us on our socials at all, always go to at the OBT podcast for more content and updates, and also continue to like and subscribe. We appreciate you all. Thanks for watching.